Testing, testing. I call the meeting to order. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon if you're here in Geneva, and greetings to those who are in different parts of the world. Today we are in day 3 of our program for the week, and this afternoon is reserved for the working group on transparency and reporting. They have an agenda in place that would guide the discussions this afternoon. But before I hand over to the 2 co-chairs of the working group, I would want to just remind you again of the standard working rules for our meeting. Of course, the first one being about interpretation, it remains in place in all languages. And secondly, the speakers list has not been prepared in advance. We will be taking speakers as they request for the floor, either through raising their nameplate or by sending their request via the chat function. The other interesting announcement to make is that we are, as a secretariat, as we have done in the past, the proceedings here are recorded. So the recordings of the first day and possibly the second day are already available on the website for your access. If you go to our website, you can have access of the proceedings of the first and the second day. And lastly, we request speakers who are in a position to do so to provide us with their written statements so that they can be uploaded on the ATT website. Of course, we are not insisting on that, but if you have a written statement that you would want to see uploaded on the ATT website for information, please do so by sending it to the info address of the ATT Secretariat so that it can be uploaded. I take this opportunity then at this point to hand over to the co-chairs of the working group. They are newly minted, the 2 co-chairs who were appointed by the President for CSP8 cycle. The first, just to introduce them, one is Madam Sabine Visser from the Netherlands, as well as Grisel Rodriguez from the Panama. So they're the new co-chairs of the working group on transparency and reporting. I have the pleasure then to hand over to them to facilitate today's discussions. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Thank you, Dumisani. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us in the meeting of the ATT Working Group on Transparency and Reporting. My name is Sabine Visser from the MFA of the Netherlands, and together with my co-chair, Ms. Grisel Rodriguez from the Permanent Mission of Panama in Geneva, I have the honor to co-chair this meeting today. At this point, we would like to thank the previous co-chairs of the working group, Ms. Julia Vladescu of Romania and Mr. Alejandro Alba Fernandez of Mexico for their diligent and successful efforts in advancing the work of the working group. We would also like to express our gratitude to the President for organizing this meeting and to the ATT Secretariat for its indispensable support in the run-up of this meeting. We will open the meeting with the adoption of the agenda. The draft annotated agenda was circulated on the 31st of January together with an introductory paper. The co-chairs would like to remind participants that during the CSP7, states parties endorsed a number of standing agenda items and recurring and specific tasks for the working group for the period between CSP7 and CSP8. The standing agenda items that states parties instructed the working group to deal with as a minimum are the following 6 items. First, state of play of compliance with reporting obligation. Second, challenges concerning reporting. Third, substantive reporting and transparency issues. Fourth, organizational means for information exchange. Fifth, IT platform, reporting and transparency functionalities. And sixth, the Working Group for Transparency and Reporting mandate in the period between CSP8 and CSP9. In light of the reduced time allocated to this meeting due to the hybrid format, the co-chairs have adapted the agenda to ensure that enough time is allocated for each topic and to allow for sufficient discussion. Topics that have been omitted from the agenda can still be addressed in writing or be postponed to the next preparatory meeting in the CSP8 cycle. The co-chairs encourage participants to submit any proposals via the email or via the information exchange platform. The co-chairs would at this point like to ask participants if they have any remarks about the draft annotated agenda, or if they want to propose any additional agenda items under AOB. If so, please take the floor. I don't see any delegates asking for the floor. No, then I conclude that the agenda is adopted. We will address the agenda points in the order listed and look forward to a constructive, interactive, and lively debate during the meeting. With that, we move to the first agenda item, the state of play of compliance with reporting obligation. In every meeting, the working group reviews the status of reporting. To this end, the ATT Secretariat will give a presentation with a general overview of the reporting status and of the progress that has been made in comparison to the previous status update. So without further ado, I pass the floor to Ms. Sarah Parker of the ATT Secretariat.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much to the co-chairs for the invitation to give an overview of the current status of ATT reporting. Can I just grab the clicker before I go any further? Thank you. As you will all recall, Article 13.1 of the treaty requires each state party to submit an initial report on its implementation of the treaty within 1 year of the treaty entering into force. In addition, Article 13.3 requires states parties to submit an annual report on their imports and exports. I'm going to start with initial reports, giving both a global overview as well as a regional breakdown. I will then do the same with annual reports, giving the global picture and, again, a regional breakdown. So starting with initial reports, to date, we have 110 states parties, and all of them should have submitted an initial report by now. That is 100% of states parties. In fact, 84 states parties have done so. So this means that 76% of states parties that were due to report have done so. This means we've received 3 new initial reports since August last year, when I gave an update during the 7th Conference of States Parties. But the number of states parties that should have submitted a report has also obviously gone up. There are 26 states parties that should have submitted their initial report by now and have not yet done so. That is 24%. On the next slide, we've provided some additional information on initial reports. As you will recall, states parties do have the option to request that their initial report not be made public. 20 states have requested that their initial reports not be made public. That is 24% of initial reports that have been submitted. In August last year, that figure was 21%. 17 states had restricted their initial reports. So these reports are available to states parties on the restricted area of the website only. We have also indicated whether initial reports were submitted on time. With respect to initial reports we've received so far, 42 of them were received on time or before they were due. That is 50%. Finally, a total of 71 states that submitted their initial reports, that is 85%, used the reporting template in their submissions. Article 13 also stipulates that states parties shall report on any new measures undertaken to implement the treaty when this is appropriate. So far, 6 states have submitted updated initial reports. And I'm pleased to report that the state party that submitted an updated initial report most recently, last week in fact, used the revised reporting template that was adopted by CSP7. I'm now going to look at reporting at the regional level. In this slide, we have an overview of participation in the reporting process by region. We based the regional classification on the UN Statistics Division classification system. The green colour, of course, indicates states parties in the region that were due to report and have done so, and the red indicates states parties in the region that were due to submit an initial report, and have not done so. So if we look at Africa at the top, on the top row, we see that there are 14 states parties that should have submitted an initial report and have done so, and there are 14 states parties that should have submitted an initial report by now and have not yet done so. With respect to the Americas, the next row, we see that there are 19 states parties that should have submitted an initial report and have done so, and there are 8 states parties that should have submitted an initial report and have not yet done so, and so on. Moving on now to annual reports. This slide gives us a summary of how many annual reports were due, submitted, not made public, and submitted on time for all of the reporting years so far. So that is 2015 to 2020. So column 1 indicates the year that we're referring to. Column 2 tells us how many annual reports were due each year. So in 2015, 61 annual reports were due. In 2016, 75 annual reports were due, and so on. As the number of states parties has grown, so has the number of states that must submit annual reports, obviously. Column 3 tells us how many annual reports were submitted each year in terms of the actual number, as well as the percentage of reports due that year, and this is the figure in brackets. So for 2015, we see that 51 annual reports were submitted, and this was 84% of the annual reports due that year. The fourth column indicates how many states parties submitted a report, even though they were not yet required to do so. These have not been factored into the percentages, but they are just there for your information. Column 5 tells us how many states parties were supposed to submit an annual report in a given year, but did not do so. And column 6 indicates how many states requested their annual report be made available to states parties only. And we can see this has risen from 2 reports in 2015, or 4%, to 19 reports, or 31% in 2020. With respect to timeliness, states parties are due to submit their annual reports by the 31st of May each year. We see a lot of states parties submitting their reports 2 or 3 days after the deadline, so we give a little bit of a grace period here, and we treat anyone who reports within 7 days of the deadline as having submitted on time. And the final column gives an indication of how many states parties submitted their annual reports on time each year. Now, just in terms of the use of the reporting tool, for 2020, 12 states used the online reporting tool to submit their annual report. 6 uploaded their report to the online system, meaning they submitted a PDF of their report and uploaded it to the system, but they didn't use the online tool itself. And 3 submitted their UN Register report, UNROCA. The chart on the next slide gives a summary of how many reports were and were not submitted. So we can conclude or summarize that a higher percentage of states parties fulfilled their obligation to submit annual reports for 2015. But we should also keep in mind, of course, that there were fewer states parties at that time with an obligation to report. And the next slide shows these figures in terms of actual numbers. So you can see from this that more states reported in 2020. There are 61 states versus 2015, where 51 states reported. But more states were due to report, of course, because there are more states parties to the treaty with a reporting obligation now. Now we're going to take a brief look at annual reporting by region. This chart shows us percentage of states parties in each region that should have submitted annual reports each year and did so, by region and by year. So for instance, the first set of columns shows reporting by states parties in Africa. The dark blue column tells us that 71% of states parties in Africa that should have reported in 2015 did so. The yellow column tells us that 46% did so in 2016. The orange column tells us 29% did in 2017, and so on. And you can see the yearly rates of reporting for each region as you move across the chart. On a final note, we've also prepared a slide that gives an indication of how many states parties have submitted all of the annual reports that they were due to submit over the years. So in this pie chart, the green segment tells us that 55 states parties, which is 52%, of states parties due to submit an annual report have submitted an annual report every year that they were supposed to do so. So if they were supposed to have submitted 6 reports by now, they've submitted 6 annual reports. If they were required to have submitted 2 annual reports by now, they've submitted 2, and so on. So they fulfilled all their annual reporting obligations 100% in full. The yellow segment tells us that 20 states parties, or 19% of states due to submit an annual report, submitted at least 1 annual report, but not all of the annual reports that they were required to submit over the years. So maybe they should have submitted 5 annual reports by now, and they've only submitted 3. Or maybe they have submitted, so they have 2 outstanding reports, sorry. And the red segment, finally, tells us that there are 30 states parties, or 29% of states parties due to submit an annual report, that have never submitted an annual report. So maybe they should have submitted 5 by now, or 2, but they have submitted 0. Now, what is the purpose of this analysis? Well, as part of the outreach that the ATT Secretariat intends to take with respect to reporting, we feel that it's important to distinguish between those states parties that have submitted at least some reports that were due and those that have never submitted an annual report. If a state party has managed to submit 1 or 2 annual reports, but not all of them, then you're likely to ask them different questions as to why they've not fulfilled all of their reporting obligations. Or perhaps more importantly, they will probably have different answers to the question, why have you not submitted all of your annual reports? Obviously, at some point, the state had the information and the data required, they had the interagency cooperation needed to prepare and submit a report, or more than one report. Maybe it's a single person was in charge and he or she left their post and no one has taken over that task. A state that has never submitted an annual report, though, may be facing very different challenges. Maybe they're not even aware that they have to submit an annual report in the first place. So when we target these different groups to determine why they have not submitted all their annual reports, or any of their annual reports, we will be asking different questions and presumably dealing with different challenges that states parties face. So we've included this slide to illustrate how we plan to approach partial and non-reporting states as part of our outreach to improve reporting. And with that, I thank the co-chairs once again. And of course, as with all the Secretariat's presentations, we will be making these slides available on the website so you can take a longer look. Thank you.
Many thanks to you, Sarah, for this most informative presentation, as well as for the Secretariat's continued work on managing the reporting under the ATT. The co-chairs are happy to note there have been some improvements, such as the updates on initial reporting and more timely reporting, but are also concerned about the continued downward trend in the level of reporting under the ATT. With that, I would like to open the floor to participants who wish to share their view on the status of reporting. I see there has been a request for the floor by Matt for Peace. I give you the floor.
Thank you for providing me with an opportunity to participate in this important discussion having to do with transparency and reporting. We are quite anxious about the number of reports that are being presented to the Secretariat. And we have seen that there are only 20 countries that have presented their reports to the Secretariat with regards to these annual reports that have to be presented. It is a weak percentage. Between 2015 to 2020, we see that the percentage of the due annual reports have seen a constant reduction, and also countries that have never presented their reports, such as Nigeria and Afghanistan. And there hasn't been a continuous interaction with the Secretariat. Has this to do with the mechanism put in place, and we have to encourage the state parties to present their reports. And as the Secretariat's office has indicated, we have to look and review the mechanism in place for the reporting of these annual reports. And this is an important procedure, as we have experts who review the national reports presented within timeframes. We also would like to mention the necessity of building the capacities of the organizations in the civil society. Thank you. The speaker spoke at extreme speed and the quality of the sound was very weak. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt, for peace. I would like to future delegates to speak a little bit more slowly for the interpreters. I see that the EU has raised its flag. I give you the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair, and congratulations to both you and Madam Rodriguez for their appointment as co-chairs of this working group. Madam Co-Chairs, I have the honor to speak on behalf of the European Union and its member states, the candidate countries, the Republic of North Macedonia, Montenegro, and Albania, and the EFTA countries, Iceland and Norway, as well as Georgia, align themselves with this statement. The EU supports the principles of cooperation, responsibility, and transparency in the international arms trade enshrined in the Arms Trade Treaty. Transparency and reporting are key elements leading to confidence building among states and enabling accountability and scrutiny for arms export decisions taken by national authorities. Reporting on arms exports and imports represents one of the cornerstone obligations of the ATT. We therefore reiterate our call on all states parties to fulfill their reporting obligations in a timely and transparent manner, and transparent means publicly available. Without public reporting, states parties undermine the effectiveness of the treaty, and we regret, therefore, the fact that China has decided not to make its initial report under the ATT publicly available. We call on China to reconsider this decision in the spirit of the ATT. The long trend of decreasing reporting rates is highly regrettable and alarming. We hope to see better figures and would like to take the opportunity to draw attention to the upcoming deadline for submitting the annual report for 2021. We commend all states parties that have already filled in their annual reports for 2021 and encourage others to follow suit in a timely manner and to share their reports publicly. There are many reasons for the current low reporting rate, including a lack of capacity and resources, international coordination challenges, and difficulties in conducting technical assessments. While it is important to discuss these challenges and find practical ways to overcome them, reporting is and remains a fundamental obligation for states parties that must be adhered to. The EU stands ready to assist. And in this regard, we recall that the EU ATT outreach program has entered into a third phase. Also, the EU supports the ATT Secretariat in assisting states parties in need. And then, of course, there's the voluntary trust fund for this purpose as well. The EU adopted its 23rd annual report on arms exports on 28 September 2021, informing in detail on arms sales authorized by EU member states in the last year, or in the previous last year, 2020. It is the fastest annual report release until up to date, within 9 months of the end of the reporting year. On top of that, the EES, the European External Action Service, has launched a searchable online database containing the annual arms export data of all member states since 2013. Later on today, I will give a more detailed presentation on that, so I will not go into detail in this statement, but you will hear more about this database under the last agenda item at the request of the co-chairs. Finally, we reaffirm our commitment to transparency in international arms trade, and in this regard, we have taken a number of concrete measures in order to facilitate correct, coherent, and timely reporting on member states' arms exports. We call on all states parties to opt for public reporting, which clearly increases the relevance of the reports and facilitates accountability for export decisions. We are grateful, finally, to the ATT Secretariat for their continued updates on the number of initial and annual reports, which help us track progress. Thank you, Madam Co-Chairs.
Thank you to the delegate of the European Union. Cameroon, you have the floor.
Merci de me donner la parole.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor in the name of Cameroon. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the co-chairs of the Working Group on Transparency and Reporting for the efforts undertaken. The density of documents is quite clear. I would also like to welcome the choice that has been of having 2 women at the head of the coordination of this working group. When we look at the present discussion, Cameroon would like to note that it gives particular importance to the issue of transparency and has highlighted this through the regular submission of its annual reports. My country has submitted its initial report as well as annual reports from 2019 and 2020. These 2 annual reports were submitted in one go during 2021. When you look at the ATT site, you can only note the submission of the 2020 report. If I'm not mistaken, Cameroon would be very grateful to the Secretariat if it could readjust the information saying that reports of 2019 and 2020 were submitted. This to say that Cameroon is up to date in its obligations in terms of Article 13.3 of the ATT. The choice of submitting 2 reports in one go is due to the delay in gathering data, which is a real constraint in the present preparation of the annual reports. All the institutions concerned are called upon, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs coordinates the whole procedure. The method will be refined with time in the light of exchanges such as these, and thus to facilitate the use of the template prepared by the working group, Cameroon would suggest that we can extract from the document on questions and replies on establishing reports and include in one single document the explanatory notes to be used for the model or template, which would also offer opportunity to explain the revised template. This would lead to broader use of the said template by state parties when more than one use a free choice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cameroon, for your intervention. We would also like to ask all delegations to send in their submission in writing, if that is possible. The following delegations have asked for the floor: China, Switzerland, and Control Arms. I will give you the floor. China, you have the floor.
Thank you, co-chairs. I take this opportunity, the Chinese delegation wish to thank the WG for promoting its work and thanks its efforts. China believes that the timely submission of compliance reports in enhancing arms trade transparency, greater mutual confidence among states, and realizing purposes and objectives of the treaty has great significance. In recent years, China has actively submitted reports to the UN Register of Conventional Arms and, as requested, provides annual data of transferring 7 categories of conventional arms. They are all publicly available on the internet. After acceding to the ATT, China immediately started preparing for the relevant compliance reports and timely submitted its initial report to the Secretariat before October. By the end of May, China will also submit its first annual report to the treaty. China welcomes that the Secretariat timely completed Chinese translation of templates and uploaded them on the website. It facilitates China's efforts to coordinate competent authorities and to draft experts' reports. China appreciates this. China notes that in increasing submissions and their quality, challenges remain. China wishes to work with others to urge states party to timely submit requested reports and to effectively fulfill treaty obligations. It also encourages states to use templates, increase information transparency, and share experiences and practices with others. China notes that the EU statement and requested China to increase report transparency. As a matter of fact, based on the treaty, China has submitted its initial report, fully reflecting China's transparency. All states Maltese, including the EU member states, can all see China's reports. I think the EU should use its influence to motivate the largest exporter of weapons to accede to the treaty, rather than question its so-called concerns regarding China's report's transparency. Thank you.
Thank you to the delegation of China. I now hand the floor to Switzerland.
Thank you, co-chairs. Can you hear me all well?
Yes, we can hear you very well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Then let me first of all express Switzerland's gratitude for your much appreciated work in light of the still unfavorable circumstances related to the COVID-19 pandemic. Switzerland strongly encourages state parties to not only submit their reports according to the obligation defined in Article 13 of the treaty, but also to make the reports publicly available and to use the online reporting tool for submitting their reports. This not only improves transparency, but also allows for an easy comparison of the data submitted. Switzerland would like to express its support for the suggested amendments of the frequently asked questions type guidance document on the annual reporting obligations. Thank you.
Thank you, Switzerland, for your intervention, of course, also for your support. I now give the floor to Control Arms.
Good morning, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Thank you, co-chairs. The ATT Monitor, an independent project of Control Arms, would like to commend both the working group co-chairs and the ATT Secretariat on the efforts taken to prepare the introductory paper, including the proposed amendments to the FAQ type guidance document on the annual reporting obligations. The ATT Monitor would also like to commend the working group co-chairs and the ATT Secretariat for continuing to provide resources and guidance on reporting during this intersessional period prior to CSP8, and we welcome the opportunity to exchange views on how gender and transparency can be further included in the work of the working group. We fully support the collective work done to improve compliance with reporting obligations so that all states parties can fully report accurately and on time. ATT Monitor analysis of 2020 annual ATT annual reports shows that the on-time completion rate for 2020 annual reports improved slightly compared to the previous year when the COVID pandemic was hitting. But the overall ATT annual reporting rate was the lowest of any year and significantly below to the level seen in the first round of ATT reporting, which marked the highest compliance rate of any reporting year at 88%. Despite the persistent challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic in 2021, the geographic and systemic diversity of those that were able to report by the deadline indicates that the largest impediment to engagement in ATT reporting is most likely the lack of political will. Because annual reporting is an obligation in Article 13.3, there is still work to be done to support full compliance of these obligations by all states parties. ATT Monitor analysis further shows that the rate of public reporting continued to drop with the submission of 2020 annual reports. Only 40% of the states parties due to submit a report submitted one that was publicly available. In fact, the percentage of publicly available 2020 annual reports is the lowest since 2015. Private reporting, on the other hand, continued its upward trend. 31% of the total 2020 annual reports submitted were confidential, compared to 23% of 2019 annual reports. As with annual reports, there also remains an upward trend towards private reporting for initial reports, as 20% of all submitted initial reports are confidential, as the ATT Secretariat just showed. In 2021, 5 states parties were due to submit their initial reports, but only one did it, and it kept it private. Also of great concern is the low number of states parties who have submitted updates to their initial reports. To date, as the ATT Secretariat just updated, only 6 states parties have provided such updates. The ATT Monitor supports the European Union's call for transparency in reporting. We look to states such as those that are permanent members of the UN Security Council and states parties to the ATT to demonstrate leadership in implementing the principles of transparency. Thank you, co-chairs.
Thank you to Control Arms for that intervention and also your diligent work for monitoring the ATT reporting in the ATT Monitor. I'm just going to request whether there are any more requests for the floor. I see that France has requested the floor. France, you have the floor.
Thank you. Hello to all. I would like to thank the co-chairs for their work. I'm going to cover several items of the agenda, and I will do this in block. First of all, Madam Chairs, I would like to thank you for the various proposals that have been formulated in the document that was conveyed before this meeting. We attach great importance to respecting our obligations under Article 13, and every year we convey a report on our export and import of conventional weapons. This report completes the other reports that are transmitted by France relating to arms transfers in the context of transparency exercises in which we take part, both internationally and multilaterally, as well as regionally and nationally. We would like to recall that these various reports are available online and may be consultable freely and freely searchable. We would like to call upon all of the states parties to comply with their obligations under the ATT. We encourage them to make public their reports. As we have already had the opportunity to say, we are very happy that this forum exchange of information in the area of diversion is being set in place. This is a very useful tool to fight the diversion of conventional weapons. We hope that the next meeting of the DF will take place soon. The FAQ document that has been developed by the working group is an especially useful tool to back states in their efforts to draw up their yearly reports, and we're fully in agreement with the modifications that you're suggesting. We also thank the Secretariat for its proposal. We're perfectly in agreement. This relates to the development of a database, a searchable database, regarding the information communicated by states parties in the national reports. However, we would like to recall that the implementation of this project should not lead to an imposition upon states parties of the use of report templates that were discussed at the previous CSPs. And we would be interested in receiving information regarding this project, particularly regarding the costs and the implementation of this project and the information that will be made available. As regards to this last point, what is important is to identify how this database will be used compared to the register of the United Nations. And once again, I would like to assure you of our full support and thank you, Madam Co-Chairs. Thank you.
Thank you, France, for that intervention. Please note that we will be discussing the online database on the last agenda item for today. I see that Costa Rica and Germany have asked for the floor. I give the floor to Costa Rica.
Thank you, Co-Chair. We take the floor under this item to thank the facilitators of the Working Group on Transparency and Reporting for the efforts carried out, and we'd like to share 4 ideas. Compliance with transparency measures is a key component of this treaty, and we need to take up this obligation and be accountable with the regime thanks to the reports so we have to submit annually. We think that the rate of compliance is not satisfactory. Institutions of my country have taken on additional measures during this pandemic to improve the quality and precision of the details we provide in our reports. Given the challenges we faced in our categories and classification between the Ministry of Defense and the National Customs Office, last year, in the framework of the project to promote the Treaty of the EU, we called on the need to organize a workshop regarding the modalities of our annual reports. Regarding the documents that this working group has provided, we'd like to coordinate with the World Customs Organization to facilitate identification of conventional weapons within the harmonized registry. We also need to improve the rate of public reports to improve transparency, because they allow us to identify the weaknesses in the different phases of transfer of conventional weapons. Finally, Costa Rica celebrates the work of this group in correlating rates of armed violence and trafficking of conventional weapons. We also applaud the focus you've put on gender-based violence. You can count on the support of Costa Rica in all these efforts. Thank you very much.
Thank you to the delegate of Costa Rica for that support and also for sharing your national developments. That's very useful. I now give the floor to Germany.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Germany believes that reporting is a very important tool to provide the transparency the ATT aims for. Civil society can give important additional input on ATT reporting. The Stimson Center and CPRI have proven this in several projects funded by Germany in the past. However, Germany has the impression that new candidates to the ATT might be put off by reporting obligations. Furthermore, the complexities in reporting might even factor into the slowing down of universalization. Therefore, Germany believes the exchange of good practices and assistance with reporting, for example, through the Voluntary Trust Fund, to be essential. At the same time, Germany believes the possibility of authorizing the United Nations Office for Disarmament to use relevant information as a basis for the report to the United Register on Conventional Arms to be part of the solution to reporting problems which some state parties or signatory states might have. We hope that the peer-to-peer support amongst states parties can be taken up again, despite the restrictions imposed by the pandemic. Germany supports this idea. Thank you, co-chairs.
Thank you, Germany, for that intervention. I now hand the floor to Mexico.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mexico's government appreciates the work carried out by the co-chairs. The working group and all the efforts you have carried out to promote transparency and reporting are key to consolidate the regime of the treaty. All these efforts for our government are fundamental for other projects and works. The quality of reports is likewise important, and this is something we need to take up. Reports are the basis in many occasions of other further studies which are developed within national institutions and within other organizations of civil society and the academia world. Despite logistic restrictions derived from the COVID pandemic, my government has been able to, in an exhaustive and timely manner, submit our annual reports. We share the concern expressed by many, given the decrease in the rate of annual reports, but we're also convinced that the efforts deployed in this group will will revert the trend and increase the number of annual reports. My government has no suggestions to make to the guidance document, and we subscribe the possibility of improving, including amendments that may improve reporting obligations. We also appreciate that the gender dimension has been incorporated into the documents. We also welcome using templates for initial reports and annual reports, which we approved in CSP8. And we also encourage all state parties and to all those other actors interested in reporting and transparency to further advance their efforts to avoid duplication of efforts in reporting with other treaties, processes, or obligations that may derive from other international fora. Avoiding this duplication of efforts and identifying synergies in reporting will also contribute to improve the rate of report submissions. Thank you very much.
Thank you to Mexico for that intervention and your very helpful suggestions. I see no more delegation in the room asking for the floor. Are there any online? No, there are not. With that, we would like to close this agenda item by noting the significant concern expressed by participants that took the floor that 42% of states parties have not fulfilled their annual reporting obligation under Article 13.3 of the treaty last year, and 23% of states parties have not met their obligation to submit their initial report under Article 13.1. As a whole, only 52% of states parties are in full compliance with their reporting obligations. The co-chairs underline that the reporting obligations are an integral part of the treaty and necessary for its effective functioning. So let's try to reverse the trend this year. The co-chairs also noted concerns about the growing number of countries that make their reports available to state parties only. While there is no obligation to make reports available to all stakeholders, it strongly contributes to the treaty's objective of transparency. The deadline for submitting the annual report is the 31st of May. We call on states parties to make the appropriate efforts to fulfill their reporting obligations. In doing so, please use the revised reporting templates endorsed at CSP8. We would also like to point out that it is still possible to hand in reports that were due in previous years and encourage all state parties that have not reported in the past years to do so. We strongly encourage the representatives of states parties to check the ATT website to check whether their report was issued by the Secretariat and pose on the website in accordance with their preferences. With that, we close this agenda item and move to the next item on the agenda concerning challenges concerning reporting. As noted in the agenda and the introductory paper, it is the co-chair's intention to address 3 of the 6 tasks under this agenda item during this session and to address the remaining 3 tasks during future meetings. In the interest of time and to avoid member states having to make multiple interventions, the co-chairs will introduce all 3 tasks at the same time and then invite participants to take the floor on all or any of these tasks. Under the first recurring task, working group participants have the opportunity to share any challenges they are facing in submitting timely and accurate initial and annual reports. We would like to recall that this is traditionally included in the working group mandate to offer states parties a platform to share problems and difficulties and to share solutions and good practices in the fulfillment of reporting obligations. And as we just saw in the previous agenda item, there are problems and difficulties in reporting. So please share with us both your problems and as well as good practices to address these issues. The second recurring task under this agenda item concerns the outreach strategy on reporting. As you will recall, CSP8 established the mandate for presidents of Conference of State Parties for bilateral contacts with states parties that are in arrears with their reporting obligations. In the introductory paper, the co-chairs noted and commended the outreach that was done by the presidents of CSP6 and CSP7 via individualized letters and bilateral engagement. We will follow up with the Secretariat on these activities and will report back in due course. We would also like to invite participants of the working group to continue looking for ways and mechanisms to improve the reporting under the ATT and call on states parties, civil society, and regional organizations to brief the working group on initiatives focused on enhancing compliance with reporting obligations. The co-chairs would also like to point to the assistant measures that are in place for supporting implementation of the treaty, including its reporting obligations, such as the Voluntary Trust Fund. The VTF can be a clear catalyst in improving reporting practices, as was shared by one state party during the preparatory cycle of CSP8. We encourage beneficiaries of the VTF and other assistance mechanisms to keep reporting on their experiences and progress. Now I would like to hand over the reins to Grizel to cover the last task under this agenda item, which is the frequently asked type guidance documents on the annual reporting obligations.
Muchas gracias, Sabine.
Thank you very much, Sabine. This is one of the recurrent matters under this item of the agenda. The guidance document in its chapter FAQs on annual reporting was approved by member states in CSP3 and was later updated in CSP5. Several amendments were incorporated to reflect the new online reporting tool. Last year, in the last CSP, the new template was approved for annual reporting, and it recommended that state parties use it to fulfill their reporting obligations in virtue of Article 13.3 of the ATT. In view of these advances, the co-chairs reassessed the FAQ of the guidance document, and with the support of the Secretariat, we have elaborated a series of suggestions to include in this new template. You will find those suggestions in Annex 1 of our introductory document. I'd like to hand over the floor now to Sarah Parker from the Secretariat of the ATT, so she can give us a glimpse, an overview into the suggested amendments. Sarah, you have the floor.
Hello again, and thank you so much to the co-chairs for this opportunity. I won't be talking through the changes in detail, but just to give an overview of the types, the nature of the changes that have been proposed and suggested in the FAQ document. So as mentioned, this is Annex A to the co-chair's introductory paper, and the suggested changes, the proposed changes, are in markup or in red, so you can clearly see what is being suggested. Just by way of background, the guidance document we're referring to was initially prepared by Belgium in 2017 and was designed to help states prepare their annual reports. It consists of a series of questions and answers, and this is why it's referred to as the FAQ document, meaning frequently asked questions. So the FAQ document was endorsed by CSP3 as an informative and open-ended reference document, and the conference noted that, I quote, proposals for alterations and additional questions and answers may be made at any time and should be considered in the working group on transparency and reporting. So this is what we're doing today. We're considering some proposals that are being made to the document. So, as already suggested or mentioned, following the adoption of the revised reporting templates by the 7th Conference of States Parties, it was felt that a proposal to amend the FAQ document was needed to ensure that it is aligned with the current annual reporting template. So many of the changes in the guidance document are designed to take account of changes that were made to the template and to reflect the fact that the reporting template has been amended. So, for example, the guidance document refers to the fact that the annual reporting template now includes a specific field inviting a reporting state to authorize the UN Office for Disarmament Affairs to use information in the report as a basis for the state's report to the UN register. Many of you will recall that there is now a specific field in the annual reporting template that allows states to indicate this. Also, on the cover page of the annual reporting template, the date for submission has been changed to the date of the report because they are often not the same. The date that the state prepares the report is not always the date that it submits the report. So these changes have occurred or are suggested in the FAQ document. Furthermore, there is a suggestion to remove the references to voluntary and mandatory questions and other elements to reflect the removal of this terminology from the annual reporting template. Other changes that have been suggested include some cosmetic changes and the correction of a single error, I think there was in the document. So, for example, the suggestion is made to change the reference from ATT reporting template to annual reporting template, because, of course, we must not forget there is also an initial reporting template. This change makes it clear that the document is referring to the annual reporting template. It's possibly not needed given the title of the document, but it will just remind the user that that's the template we're referring to. We've also suggested changing the Secretariat to ATT Secretariat. Why? Simply for continuity with other documents which are part of the process. We prefer the reference to ATT Secretariat in full. In terms of an error, as I mentioned, the original response to question 20 indicated that there's a column in the annual reporting template dedicated to intermediate location, where a reporting state can indicate where there is an intermediate location. But in fact, although this column does appear in the UN register template, it wasn't in the annual reporting template. So we've suggested amending this and inviting states instead to include information on the intermediate location in the remarks column, comments column. Finally, we have suggested making some amendments that give a bit more information on how the online reporting platform works, as well as how the Secretariat records the submission of reports and how it uses that information to generate reports on the status of reporting. As I mentioned, all of these changes are marked up in red for ease of reference. And I think consideration of this document is quite timely, given that your next annual report is due on the 31st of May 2022. So it's a good opportunity to familiarise yourselves with the FAQ guidance document and the reporting template itself. Thank you so much.
I would like to thank this ATT Secretariat for this very detailed presentation. I hope this has brought clarity on the reason behind each of these proposals. I would now like to recall all participants that the guiding document on FAQ requires that all proposals or reforms and the different additional questions and answers be considered in this working group. In our introductory paper, the co-chairs have invited all participants to review those amendments suggested in Annex A and to send any document or additional proposal for amendments and additional questions either to us co-facilitators or the Secretariat of the ATT or via the exchange of information platform at the latest 10 days before our meeting. And in this regard, I would like to inform you that the co-facilitators have not received any comments or specific proposals on this specific document on the indicated channels of communication. I would now like to give the floor to all participants who may wish to share their point of view on this draft amendment presented by co-facilitators and any other issue on this point in the agenda. We do understand that some delegations have already taken up this issue in previous items, and those who haven't can now have the floor. I therefore give the floor to Matt for Peace. Matt for Peace, you have the floor.
I have a question about reporting. You said that the deadline is the 31st of May. Do the civil society organizations have to send their reports before that date? Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt for Peace. Quick clarification. When we are mentioning 31st of May, we mean that is the deadline for state parties to carry out their report presentation. I'm not sure that this clears your question, but it's only so state parties fulfill their obligations under Article 13 of the ATT. I hope that this has cleared up that question. If not, obviously, we are at your disposal to answer any other additional questions you may have. Next speaker in my list is Japan. Delegation of Japan, you have the floor.
Japan would like to express its gratitude to the co-chairs of the Transparency and Reporting Working Group from the Netherlands and Panama, and also the Secretariat for your dedication to the work of working groups and for preparing the proposed draft update of the FAQ type guidance document. Japan attaches great importance to transparency in the arms trade. As outlined in Article 13 of the treaty, reporting is a fundamental obligation and an important tool for ensuring that transparency. Japan has fulfilled its reporting obligation since joining the treaty, and past 3 years, we have submitted our annual reports by using the online reporting tools. While Japan shares the concern of the low rate of the compliance with the reporting obligations, we also understand the challenges and difficulties that the state party face for submitting their report in a timely and accurate manner. In this connection, Japan welcomes the ongoing EU project to provide capacity building support to the ATT national points of contact, including fulfilling the reporting requirement. We also thank the Secretariat for organizing an online meeting among national point of contacts on Monday, 14th February, as a part of the EU project. It was a valuable opportunity to share and understand the challenges facing each state in fulfilling their ATT obligations, including reporting. Regarding the updated FAQ type guidance document, Japan would like to make a preliminary comments on the section 2 on page 4. We see the first paragraph A, Article 13.3, contains additional text in the lead between the article text of the treaty. To avoid misunderstanding, as this is not a text found in the treaty, we believe that this additional text should be in a separate paragraph or section. Lastly, transparency is a key purpose of the ATT, and it serves to build confidence among states as well as to promote international and regional peace and security. Japan would like to encourage all the state parties to submit both in their initial and annual reports in a timely manner. Thank you, co-chairs.
Thank you, Japan. We thank you as well, the very specific comments that you have given us on those amendment proposals, we will be obviously having a look and take them into consideration for our next preparatory meeting. I will now like to give the floor to South Africa. You have the floor, South Africa.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. I wish to congratulate you on the manner in which you're conducting, you and your co-chair conducting this meeting thus far. I waited until this agenda item just to go back quickly to agenda item 1. South Africa's annual report has been late for the last 2 years, and that is as a result of an internal discussion that we have. The reports have been completed. It's just the manner in which we wish to package the final document. So it's not a lack of political will by any means. And they will be submitted for each of the 2 outstanding years. And as I say, I waited until we got to this agenda item because you may recall that at CSP7, we had a distinct difficulty with an amendment to the report of that year, because in the report of this working group, it was stated that the aim of amending the reporting template was to address certain inconsistencies and also gaps in reporting. Now, the amendment that was proposed did not fall under any of those categories. It was a very intrusive, in our reading, very intrusive proposed amendment, which is very sensitive. And that is of disclosure of denials. And all states do deny certain transfers. And it's our sovereign right to do so. And it's not for public debate. It can harm bilateral relations quite severely. So we did make an interpretative statement, and that was annexed to the report of CSP7. It's there on the website. Now, I think that we should approach with this issue of amending the templates with a certain degree of caution. It is always tempting to see how you can reinvent the wheel. My experience is that it's not very helpful. I don't mind looking at, as Sarah introduced, certain window dressing, should we call it, amendments to the template. That's fine. But we should be very cautious how we move on this issue, on substantive issues. Many of us in this room also deal with the Mine Ban Treaty. Now, there we tinkered around with the template for years, and it was amended and amended. And what did we end up with? We ended up with a guide. There's no template anymore. There's a guide. So do we want to set this thing and put it to bed? Or do we want to end up where we did with the Mine Ban Treaty, in having a carte blanche, you can submit whatever you want to? So, you know, it's always very tempting to get into this particular field of looking at dotting I's and crossing T's, but that's not what we're here for. We need to be very cautious as a final point that there's a certain element in our work that relates to universalization. And if it appears to those outside the convention that we keep shifting the goalposts with this, they're going to turn around and say, you know, where are you heading with this thing? You know, this looks all the more complicated. And we would just stay outside this treaty. So I hope that that kind of clarifies where we stand as South Africa on this matter. I thank you, Madam Co-Chair.
Thank you, South Africa. We very much take good note of your country's position on the whole process of the adoption of the reporting models. To give you more information, obviously this exercise is an exercise that is a follow-up on the decisions made during the last CSP. This is the first time that we generate a debate on the changes that are being introduced into the FAQ document. We're obviously in the right place to show support or to bring new amendments and also oppose any doubts that may arise. Or everything is necessary to be taken into account into future meetings and see how we want this document to evolve. We are obviously at everyone's disposal to continue with this dialogue, not only within this working group, but also bilaterally. I now give the floor to Belgium. Delegation of Belgium, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and may I say good luck to you both as co-chairs. I've been in that seat, and I know that it's sometimes a difficult position to be in. I also just wanted to say one word about the proposed amendments to the FAQ document. Firstly, that we support them in general, and also as necessary to have the document in line with the amendments, and maybe to also put our South African colleague a bit at ease. We were very much convinced of the necessity to amend the reporting templates themselves, but for us, that is a process that is now finished. I think we spent 3 years on that, and it's finished, and we also don't have any intention to change those in the years to come. Obviously, at one point, an evaluation will be in order, but at least for the forthcoming years, we want to also work with the templates that we now have had. But that doesn't mean that the FAQ document needs to be in line with that, and in that sense, we think it's necessary to discuss that now. The other small point that I wanted to make about it, we will make in writing, because there are also very small technical issues, of which our Japanese colleague has pointed out one already that we also had identified. But so those will be coming to you and the Secretariat in writing. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the delegation of China. China, you have the floor.
谢谢联席主席给中方代表再次发言的机会。刚才一些代表的发言啊很有启发性。中方呢目前也正在准备。
China currently
准备首份
is also preparing its first annual report. China notes that the template of annual report compared to the UN Register's template is far more complex. I believe that to some extent it wouldn't help us to coordinate our efforts to submit reports to the ATT Secretariat and the UN Register of Conventional Arms. We also note that at the CSP8, the newly adopted template includes that whether the annual report should be publicly available. Whether it should be open to the states parties or whether it should be publicly available, I believe that we should still respect the right of states parties. On top of this, China believes that to facilitate states parties to submit their reports, first, enhance the alignment between the ATT templates with the UN registers templates so that the reported templates can be more user-friendly and facilitate submission of states parties. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Ahora...
Thank you. I now give the floor to the delegation of Argentina. Thank you very much, co-facilitator. This is the first time my delegation takes the floor. I would therefore like in this working group on transparency and reporting, we would like to congratulate you and your colleague as co-chairs of this very important group, and we would like to grant you the full support and collaboration of my delegation. We would also like to thank Ms. Parker for her presentation of this guide document on the FAQs. My delegation would like to welcome the different amendments included in this document, which we believe will help us to improve reporting, especially we take into account the decreasing percentage on reporting we have seen in recent years. Argentina believes that transparency and exchange of information are clear and key issues to create trust amongst states, and in that sense, my country has fulfilled its obligations on the basis of Articles 13.1 and 13.3, introducing the initial and annual reports in time. We hope that this amended guidance document will allow to identify the main challenges on the implementation of the treaty, improve exchange of information and good practices between states, as well as best lessons learned and practices. Having said this, my delegation would like to encourage our thanks to the co-facilitators for all their efforts. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. El siguiente orador en mi lista es...
Thank you. I now give the floor to Control Arms. You have the floor. Good morning, co-chairs. We would like to congratulate once again the co-facilitators of the working group and the Secretariat for all the efforts they have made to support state parties in the full implementation of their obligation to report. We have a number of data centers of the civil society that are a source of information on the implementation of the ATT and that bring analysis and investigations and research to strengthen the implementation efforts and improve transparency on arms trade. Specifically, the ATT monitor supports states to deal with their challenges in reporting as it gathers information and evaluates different trends on the fulfillment with the reporting obligations, evaluating the different standards on the presentation of national reports, as well as the transparency obligations, bringing an analysis country by country on the different practices put in place on reporting and other issues, as well as identifying trends on exports and imports of conventional arms and comparing them with the ATT criteria. All different state parties can consult the annual reports that we draft in order to have information on the obligations on reporting, examples of different challenges and good practices, specific recommendations on how state parties can deal with these challenges. For example, in The annual report for 2021, the ATT monitor evaluated the five first years of initial reporting and confirming that the obligations were fulfilled. And we saw a trend in the reporting that may not fulfill transparency in world arms trade, as well as the engagement and commitment of the state parties with the treaty. We would like to encourage the efforts carried out by the facilitators and chairmanships of CSP6 and 7 on the information to all those state parties who systematically have not fulfilled their obligations with reporting, as well as the document on strategies on reporting. The participation with state parties at a bilateral level is not only a reminder of these obligations in reporting, but also gives us the opportunity for states to bring forward doubts and questions that may help to shape the type of assistance they may get. We also see with very good eyes the follow-up of the ATT Secretariat of the individual letters sent by the president of CSP7, and we would like to congratulate all state parties that presented their initial and annual reports on the basis of those individual letters. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you. We have now exhausted our speakers list. We do not see any requests for the floor or in the room or remotely. On behalf of both co-facilitators, I would like to thank you all for this very fruitful debate, as well as your very important inputs, including updates on the different efforts, as well as the great support to the different amendments, including the very specific proposals and comments and reservations made. We have not received any specific requests yet, and if you may want to bring forward specific comments on these documents, we would invite you to share those comments in writing or through our exchange of information platform. We will now conclude with this item and move on to item 3, to substantive reporting and transparency issues. Under this agenda item, the intention of the co-facilitators is to deal with 2 of the 4 tasks in this agenda item in this session, and to deal with the other 2 in future preparatory meetings. We are aware that we have very little time, and co-facilitators will be introducing the 2 tasks, the 2 topics, one after the other, and we will invite speakers to take the floor on either one or both of these issues. As you will probably remember, the 5th CSP examined different aspects, both of gender and gender violence in the context of the ATT, and decided that to increase understanding of the gender impact of armed conflicts, we encourage all facilitators and chairs of working groups to take gender issues into account in their sessions. This decision is shown in paragraph 22B1, as well as the fact that state parties agreed on overviewing progress in this area regularly. Co-chairs have mentioned that this issue is not included in our mandate, and the treaty doesn't have an obligation to give information on these specific issues. Its inclusion really comes due to the interest shown in previous CSP cycles on the importance of continuing with these very up-to-date issues, as well as a way of operationalizing decisions taken by the CSP in 2019. We have taken note that some states have already made and taken some measures into account, taking gender issues into account in their reports. with criteria, including criteria on the risk analysis at the national level, assistance and capacity building, and others. Without further ado, I would like to invite Ms. Alison Pitak from the League for Women for Peace and Freedom, so that she tells us a little bit more on how to discuss on these gender issues in the framework of transparency within the ATT. Alison, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I'm just gonna, if you could bear with me for one moment while I share my PowerPoint here. All right. I think we may have to pass on that actually, and I will just dive in. First, just to say, it's very nice to be with you all today virtually. I wish that I could be there in person, and to offer our thanks to the co-chairs of this working group for inviting WILP to share a few thoughts and words on the subject of gender and reporting. We appreciate both the space to share some of our ideas with you, but also that you've made space for this subject on the working group's agenda. And today I'm going to focus on why to consider gender in the context of ATT reporting, but also some ideas for how that could be done. And then I'm just going to wind up my presentation by talking a little bit about the experience of reporting on gender in the context of the Program of Action on Small Arms and Light Weapons. So to get us started, why should we think about gender and reporting? Well, first and foremost, let us recall that Article 7.4 is a legally binding provision within the treaty. It is not an optional part of the risk assessment process. In fact, the desire to prevent GBV through the ATT risk assessment process is quite clear in the treaty's text. And it's important to remember within the arms control community that this obligation corresponds with other frameworks like the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, various human rights conventions that most, if not all, ATT states parties have endorsed. However, what we have learned over time is that how states parties assess for the risk of gender-based violence varies quite a lot. Some include it within their general human rights risk assessments. Others have made it more prominent within their corresponding national policies and legislation. Some states have expressed concern about time constraints, information constraints that prevent them from maybe digging a little bit deeper or knowing which resources to consult. And so the term gender-based violence may also not yet be as widely fully or understood by those making the risk assessments, despite how much those of us attending these meetings have talked about it. And I offer these observations based on my experience over the last several years in joining different training and capacity building activities that Control Arms, the Stimson Center, the Center for Feminist Foreign Policy have organized, from the research of WILP's own national sections, in listening to your statements and reading your submissions, in particular to the WGETI, and also in reading various publications and resources on this topic. So from where WILP sits, what is very much bound up in the why to report on gender and GBV is this very direct treaty obligation in 7.4, but also because reporting on its implementation will lead to the kind of information sharing that can thus improve everyone's implementation of this part of the treaty. And then a second part of the why is that there is a chronic and well-established problem of underreporting of gender-based violence in all countries and societies worldwide. There's also a lack of sex and gender disaggregated information. Doing more to report on gender-based violence and Article 7.4 implementation, it's not going to solve this problem entirely, but it is a step in the right direction. It will help to make gender-based violence less of an invisible problem and more visible. It will keep it at the fore of our work, improve transparency and information sharing, and contribute to the wider body of available information. So changing now to the how can we do this, I'm really going to throw a range of ideas out there. They're going to encompass both reporting on implementation of 7.4, but also some ideas for informal sharing and activities that relate to these topics, some of which touch on other of the CSP5 outcomes. And they're very much ideas and possibilities. All would benefit from more discussion and development. This is very much today just a starting point. And the most obvious starting point, of course, is to look at the ATT voluntary reporting templates as updated in 2021. And in particular, the initial report template does include a question found in section 3E, asking if national risk assessment procedures include all of the criteria described in Article 7.1a and b and Article 7.4. And while the question has the same yes or no format as the rest of the template, there is the encouragement to provide further information or elaborate more if no was the answer. So what might be some possible additional points that states parties could include here? States parties could describe what steps or individuals or departments does your national gender-based violence risk assessment process include? What types of sources are you looking into? What gaps and challenges are you experiencing? Are you engaging at all with gender advisors within your governments? And how do gender-based violence considerations generally impact on arms transfer decision-making? And as we've heard and talked about today, and has been a topic in many ATT meeting cycles, there has been a long-standing encouragement to update initial reports as well as for outstanding ones to come in. So I will here, kind of combine a pitch to update and submit those initial reports, but also really make use of the space now offered in this template to answer this question on gender and GBV more fully. And then turning to the annual report templates, some of you may recall that back in the CSP5 meeting cycle, an earlier version of the president's paper had suggested including a question on GBV in the annual report template. That did not happen then, and some have noted that the more quantitative format of this template could make gender reporting more challenging. Back in 2019, Wilkes and a few others suggested the possibility that the question could sort of be framed around asking if transfers are being denied because of GBV concerns. And I think this speaks to one of the biggest questions about the treaty's overall impact, is if some of the harms that it was designed to prevent are in fact being prevented. And even if the details of that denial cannot be disclosed, starting to see if GBV has been grounds for a denial is important and useful for our collective work in this area. Now, the templates are, of course, voluntary. It's useful and important that states use them in order to have consistency of information and for analytical purposes. But I think we could also consider that if the current form may not serve the scope or scale of information that could be shared on gender or GBV, we might want to, as the ATT community, start thinking about the possibility of attachments or an annex document that could capture relevant information, or how we can make use of other informal mechanisms like the ATT BAP, civil society reporting, as we've heard about today. And I think that there's also here a lot of scope to think about other informal channels of dialogue and exchange rather than thinking of reporting solely as the submission of reports. And this is really a great way to try to pick up on other of the CSP5 outcomes that are maybe less centrally focused on Article 7.4. And I apologize that my PowerPoint crashed just as I was about to launch my presentation, but here I was intending to put up some of the text from the final report of CSP5 so that we could be reminded of what is in it together, because there's quite a lot of different points, around sharing CSP policies and practices toward achieving gender greater balance during formal sessions or side events. There is the encouragement to support research that helps to increase the gendered impact of armed violence in the context of the ATT, and a very concrete call for lists of existing research and data sources being compiled and made available. There's also an encouragement to states parties to provide information on their national practices in GBV risk assessment, which I think can be read as a clear incentive to report on and respond to that question in the initial report template, as well as making use of other forums like the WGETI. And then there's also, references to building gender considerations into VTF projects. Possibly VTF recipients could think about doing a roundtable or having an exchange on how that's going for them, or challenges that they've been experiencing, etc. So just to kind of round things off, I wanted to share briefly a little bit about the experience of reporting on gender in the context of the Program of Action on Small Arms and Light Weapons. It is, of course, a distinct instrument from the Arms Trade Treaty, but obviously they're closely interconnected. This is both true substantively, but also in terms of who may be the people collecting information and submitting national reports. So POA reporting occurs every 2 years, and updates to its voluntary templates are not done in the same negotiated process as we have here in the ATT. Gender considerations began to be included in the POA report template following outcomes of the 6th biennial meetings of states and the 3rd review conference, which was in 2018. Currently, Section 10 of the template asks 2 questions. 10.1 asks if the country takes into account gender considerations, which is admittedly a bit of a vague term. However, there are 8 follow-on sub-questions which parse out what gender considerations could refer to, and each of those sub-questions is very clearly linked to outcomes that were found in the BMS 6 and REDCON 3 outcome documents. So they're very much anchored in the consensus agreements of member states. Question 10.2 asks if the country collects gender disaggregated data on gender and small arms and light weapons. And a 3rd question is just kind of open for additional comments. So ahead of BMS 7 in 2021, WILPF and IANSA collaborated on an analysis of gender reporting in the 2020 POA reports. I can put the link in the chat later on, and it's also going to be in the PowerPoint that will go onto the website. I wanted to just quickly share a few of the findings, particularly those which might be instructive or useful for us in the ATT community to bear in mind if we want to advance gender and reporting. So first, did many member states respond or use this part of the template? Well, of the member states who submit POA reports, which is about 46% of the total UN membership, of those, around 61.8% answered that they do take gender considerations into account, 10.6% said they do not, and 28% did not respond to the section at all. Of the reports that we examined, 21% answered yes to collecting disaggregated data, 36% answered no, but 42% did not answer at all. So we have some substantive findings in that there was a lack of additional information and details being provided in this section of report, but also that a lot of member states were not responding to this section at all. And I think given all that we've heard in this session today and earlier meetings of this working group about reporting challenges, reporting fatigue, and decreased reporting rates, I think we should maybe think about how we can offer as much guidance and support to states parties who want to pursue reporting on gender, GBV, and the ATT, so that we don't just do it as a nice gesture, but it can actually be something that has impact and is implementable. So I will stop there. I'm looking forward to hearing what others have to say. And again, this is really just a starting point of hopefully what will be a longer conversation. Thank you.
Gracias, Alison, por tu presentación y tus valiosos aportes.
Thank you for your presentation. We hope that these ideas serve states to understand the different approaches they could take whilst reporting and including the dimension of VBG in their reports. We're going to review all the different sub-items of the agenda, and then I will hand over the floor to you. The following sub-item is one that allows parties to share substantial matters relating to their reporting obligations, which could benefit from the work carried out by this working group. It's a recurrent item. In our introductory report, the co-chairs invited all participants to submit in writing via the corresponding email to co-chairs or through the online platform for information exchange to send us any idea that they would like to discuss during this cycle of CSP8. To date, we have not received any suggestion in writing. We'd like to encourage you once again to share your ideas here physically in the room or to do so via email. We'd like to use those ideas to exchange information on the challenges related to submitting initial and annual reports. There was indeed a discussion on this matter in the previous cycle for CSP7. The co-chairs then, and today as well, consider that it's important to continue discussing this matter to understand the limitations, challenges, and preferences of state parties that decide not to make their reports public. We don't obviously question their decision to do so. For those who have made their reports accessible, if they wish to change their decision, and if so, they should inform the Secretariat of the ATT. As my co-chair Sabine mentioned before, we're concerned by the increased number of state members that only submit or make their report accessible to other state parties. And although the treaty does not include an obligation to make reports publicly accessible, doing so does increase transparency and also facilitates the possibility of benefiting from technical cooperation. I'd like to hand over the floor to you now to hear your positions and ideas regarding the presentation on violence-based gender and on this other recurrent item, which I have just explained. For those who are deploying efforts to include information on violence-based gender in their reports, I'd encourage you to share your experience on that matter. And with no further ado, I'd like to hand over the floor to Nigeria.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving Nigeria the floor. Being my delegation's first time of taking the floor, permit me to congratulate you on your position as co-chairs of this working group. Co-chairs, my delegation wishes to make a few comments in national capacity on transparency reporting. Kindly pardon our late inputs as we were experiencing some technical difficulties earlier. Co-chairs, at the outset, my delegation wishes to register its approval for the amendments made to the recently circulated FAQ document. We prioritize transparency reporting as a key element for information gathering and means of evaluating states' fulfillment of their reporting obligations to the ATT. As such, Nigeria recently submitted its annual import-export report for 2021, having previously sought a submission extension deadline in 2021. My delegation would like to reiterate its support for the ATT and will continue to ensure compliance to ATT reporting obligations and policies. Finally, Nigeria looks forward to engaging with the new FAQ document to guide its future reporting obligations. I thank you, co-chairs.
Muchas gracias a Nigeria por sus comentarios.
Thank you very much, Nigeria. The State of Palestine has the floor.
At the outset, the state
De entrada, el Estado de Palestina desea manifestar su agradecimiento a los copresidentes del Grupo de Trabajo de Transparencia y Presentación de Informes, representantes de Países Bajos y de Panamá. Y a la Secretaría le agradecemos sus esfuerzos por conseguir un intercambio exitoso. Reiteramos que los informes anuales constituyen uno de los modos más eficaces para granjear confianza entre los estados. Esos informes deben incluir datos fiables y coherentes. Informar sobre el número total del tipo de armas sin mencionar el número de países a los que se exporta no es suficiente para determinar que ese país ha cumplido.
Muchas gracias al Estado de Palestina.
Thank you to the State of Palestine.
Por el momento no
I do not see any other request.
ha solicitado la palabra.
Argentina, I see you want to take the floor.
Sí, muchas gracias, señora copresidenta.
Thank you, Chair. My delegation would like to thank the World League of Women in Peace for their detailed explanation. The theme of gender for us is fundamental. We've illustrated this in our international practice and in different fora. We need to work in developing indicators and compiling information at a national level on violence-based gender, and to publish this information in the report before the 31st of May, which is the deadline included in Article 13. Such information is important to decide whether or not to incorporate an additional voluntary category on violence-based gender in reports. Argentina is ready to share with other delegations and interested parties additional information on the national reports we have on the use of firearms and feminicides. We'd also like to thank Alison Clark for her excellent preparation and for the support she provides WILF on this item of violence-based gender, and not only within ATT, but also in other fora for disarmament, non-proliferation, and peace. Thank you very much.
Argentina por sus comentarios.
Thank you very much, Argentina. We highly appreciate your willingness to share information with the research you have carried out on these hot topics. Control Arms is next.
Madam Co-Chairs, Control Arms appreciates the new focus of the Working Group on Transparency and Reporting on Gender. Engaging with the commitments made by ATT state parties as CSP8 to incorporate gender into its work is critical. And we are pleased to see this working group address head-on and incorporate these commitments into their work this CSP8 cycle. We would also like to thank Alison Pitlock of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom for her insightful and important presentation today. Control Arms supports the concept of including gender aspects into the reporting templates. In places where gender disaggregated information is available, Control Arms encourages state parties to include such information, even if not formally requested within the templates. to initiate and maintain active engagement with the specific commitments state parties made on gender as CSP5 more broadly, control arms with support from Canada, and in close cooperation with WOLF and other partners, is currently developing a methodology to monitor the progress of the ATT CSP and its state parties, both individually and collectively, in meeting the CSP5 gender commitments. In the coming months, we'll be engaging with a variety of ATT stakeholders to collect input on the proposed methodology before we finalize and introduce the project and its results at CSP8 this August. We look forward to engaging with all who would like to input into this project, and we thank you in advance for sharing your time and expertise. Thank you, Madam Co-Chairs.
Thank you very much. I think we've exhausted our speakers list. I don't see anyone else in the room who wishes to take the floor, and likewise for our Zoom participants. I'd like to thank WILP once more for their presentation, and to all the speakers that took the floor, thank you for sharing your experiences. We, myself and the other co-chair, will reflect on how to pursue on this matter. We'd also like to invite you to continue discussing this matter and to incorporate details on gender dimension in your ATT reports. And with this, we can conclude item 3 of the agenda. I'd like to pass now on to item 4, institutional agreements for the exchange of information. The first recurrent item offers participants the possibility of sharing mechanisms, procedures, or structural forms that allows them to exchange information which is encouraged or imposed by the treaty, both on a technical and operational level. Those who have requested access to the online platform of exchange information is relatively limited in number. So, therefore, the co-chairs encourage state parties and signatories to register online so that they can access the restricted area of this site on the ATT webpage. We'd also like to recall that exchanges that occur on this portal is one of the predefined levels of the 3-level scheme to avoid diversion, which was approved by states in the 4th CSP. It's also a matter that was discussed in the working group on effective implementation of the treaty and on the working group of diversion, a tool which was also approved in CSP6. In our introductory report, we welcome any suggestion you may have and wish to send to the Secretariat or to the co-chairs via email or via the portal for information exchange. Or we also welcome any verbal suggestion you may like to share today. To date, we have not received any suggestion in writing. As to the second recurrent item in that 3-level approach to share information on diversion, I'd like to invite Tom Niels, chair of the working group on diversion, to update us on the organization of the first meeting of the forum. Tom, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair, and thank you for giving me at least 1 minute of your precious time to update you on that first meeting. Unfortunately, at this moment in time, I cannot say for sure when we will have the first inaugural meeting of the Diversion Information Exchange Forum. I was thinking just now, I feel a bit like a chair with no table to sit up, because I became the chair of the forum already last year, and it wasn't possible to hold the meeting, and I also wrote that in a short report, which was also mentioned in the final report of CSP7, the fact that we considered that the DEEF meetings need to be held in person and allow broad participation of states, parties, and signatories. So we are very much dependent on how the pandemic evolves and on how our meetings will allow exactly that, broad participation of experts. So in that regard, I think that it's realistic to have some hope maybe for the summer that such meeting might be possible, and that during CSP8 itself, we will be organizing that first DEEF meeting. I mean, we've heard today support from some states parties for the meeting yesterday. There was many mention made of the usefulness of it, and also already an indication of some states parties that they are considering to share information within the forum. So I truly hope that that will be possible during CSP8, and I can only encourage state parties again now, and I will do so also in the coming months, to prepare themselves to do so, hopefully at CSP8. So I don't know whether by the April meeting I will be able to say something more about that, but that is the status of it now. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Tom, por
Thank you very much, Tom, for that update. Indeed, we depend greatly on the evolution of the pandemic, but we do hope that we'll be able to celebrate the first meeting of the DIF in the following month, and that we can do so face to face. It's what all delegations are wishing and hoping to do. I'd like to give the floor now to any participant that may like to intervene. Are there no requests in the room? No? There seem to be no requests for this item of the agenda. Belgium, sorry, I hadn't seen you. Belgium.
So sorry, and thank you. Yeah, I didn't really want to combine the two in one intervention. I just wanted to say one word about the information exchange portal, which has not really kicked off yet in the use. And in that regard, I remember that last year we discussed a little bit already, also with the facilitators in the implementation working group, about the fact that an information exchange portal could be useful for facilitators and co-chairs to prepare working group meetings, and potentially also to have some intersessional exchanges with states. But it seems like that is an idea that is hard to turn into practice. So I think maybe we should reflect a little bit on why that is, and to what extent any changes could be made to the portal in order to facilitate that kind of exchanges. That is maybe a reflection that we can have towards the April meeting of the working group. It's just a suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think there are any requests via Zoom. I'd like to thank all of you for your attention during this item, and with this, we conclude this item on the agenda. And I'd like to hand over the floor to my co-chair so that she can take care of the last two items on the agenda.
Thank you, Roselle. The last agenda item concerns reporting and transparency functionalities of the IT platform. As with the previous agenda items, in the interest of time, we will introduce both tasks under this agenda item first and invite participants to take the floor afterwards. And then the first item under agenda point 5, which is again a recurring task. States parties have the opportunity to address any problems that they experience using the information exchange platform or using the online reporting tool. Both are located in the restricted area of the ATT website. Regarding the online platform of information exchange, the co-chairs note, as was just mentioned also by the delegation of Belgium, that its use remains highly modest. In the first 2 years, other than the co-chairs of the working group, only one state party has used the platform to post information in the ATT context. We encourage other state parties to follow the example. The last task on our agenda today is the searchable online database. Today, we will follow up on the ongoing discussion regarding the searchable online database, which would allow for the extraction and analysis of data in the ATT annual reports. The concept of the searchable online database enjoyed clear consensus in the 2018 working group. The co-chairs are interested in taking this idea forward, though we recognize that the establishment of the database requires a long-term approach with careful consideration to stakeholders' expectations and, of course, to the cost and benefits of investing in such an instrument. To this end, the co-chairs recall that during the preparatory meeting of the CSP7, the ATT Secretariat presented a background paper with questions aimed at ascertaining what stakeholders want and expect from an online searchable database. This paper is included in Annex C of the introductory paper to the April meeting of last year. It is important to obtain the parameters and desired features of the online tool in order to obtain cost estimates and take the discussion forward. It is also important to establish a shared vision of a database so that no one is surprised or disappointed with the outcome. So far, there has been limited response to the paper. In order to enhance the engagement and thinking on this topic, the co-chairs have invited the European External Action Service to present the EU COARM online database created in 2020 in order to inform the discussion with a real-life example of a searchable online database. The idea is not to make a carbon copy in the ATT context. That would not be possible. The idea is to provide some ideas and inspiration regarding the possibilities and limitations of a searchable online database in the ATT context, and thereby furthering the discussion. So without further ado, I would like to invite Mr. Aaron Nagan from the European External Action Service to give a presentation. I will ask you for some patience because Mr. Nagan has to set up his presentation.
Thank you very much, Madam Co-Chairs, for the invitation and for the opportunity to make some free publicity for the COARM online database. Of course, very happy to speak to the states parties to the ATT and the assembled civil society organizations here in the room in Geneva, as well as online. Before going to the database itself, let me see. Yes. Oh, that was one too many. As a matter of introduction, let me say a couple of words on COARM, what it is for the general awareness of the audience on our mandate, reiterate some points on the importance that we see from the EU side to transparency, and then explain how it used to be done, transparency from the EU side, until the launch of the database in 2020. And then I'll show you in a couple of slides some examples of what the database looks like and what you can actually find there. So very briefly on COARM, COARM is the Council Working Group of the European Union dealing with conventional arms export control. It consists of the 27 member states and is chaired by me. It meets once a month in Brussels, and its aim is the implementation of the common position on arms export control of the EU, which is legally binding upon EU member states. And the common position contains several obligations for member states, including making assessments on license applications following 8 criteria that are part of this common position. These criteria are similar to Article 6 and 7 of the ATT. They go a bit beyond that, I would say. And part of the obligations under the common position on arms export of the European Union is also the delivery of an annual EU arms export report that includes the licenses issued by all EU member states. So the one other part I'd like to mention of the mandate of quorum and the common position is the fact that we have amongst the 27 member states no undercut principle. That means that there is also an obligation to share information amongst member states on denials. Of course, this is quite sensitive and confidential information, and it is done in a closed online database that already existed before the public online system went into place. A couple of words on the general importance of transparency in arms trade. As we also mentioned in our statement earlier today, for the EU, it is actually, I would say, threefold. It is a matter to ensure accountability for decisions taken by national authorities on issuing arms export licenses. It is a matter also of preventing corruption, I would add to that. The more transparent the trade in arms is, the less risk of corruption. And then, yeah, the issue of scrutiny, of course, comes into play as well, and is helped by this transparency as well. And finally, the topic of confidence building, indeed, between states. The more transparent we are in our trade in arms, the less risky the arms trade turns out to be. So we see it definitely also as a confidence building measure. So the situation as it was until the launch of the Quorum online database was as follows. This is just one page of the usual EU annual arms export report that we published for the last 22 years already in a written form. And I can tell you these 500 plus pages altogether, they formed kind of a paper brick with which you would be able to kill somebody. It's basically an arm in itself. And not only that, it's really unreadable. So in 2019, when the review of the common position on arms export took place, the member states agreed to turning that annual written report into a publicly accessible, easily usable database where all these numbers would be turned into something more intelligible. And that is what we did. We came up with this public online system that allows you to filter, to customize, to analyze, and to visualize all the data that is contained in there. So I'm going to quickly lead you through some of the screenshots from the database, and then I'll, of course, let you know where you can find it, so you can have a look for yourself. All the numbers that you see here are on 2020, the year 2020, which is the most recent available year. Of course, we're now working currently on collecting all the data from the member states on the year 2021, but that report will probably appear by the end of the summer. So what is included in the database? So we have a brief, you can see the logos on the top of your screen. We have a brief introduction, getting started, explanatory notes, and then we have the database itself, which contains a yearly overview of licenses, an even more detailed overview of the licenses issued, the licenses per geographical area, and then in charts with a timeline and a page on denials. This data obviously comes from the member states, the EU member states themselves. They are the ones that are it is within their competence to issue the licenses. It's a national competence, the arms export control. So the only thing that we at the EES do is compile that and turn it into something digestible for all. Obviously, the updates take place once a year because that's when we publish the new yearly report. So let's see, licenses yearly overview. We can make a breakdown by origin. So the country that issued the license, that obviously needs to be one of the 27 EU member states. Then the destination country, which can be either another country of the EU, but it can be any country across the globe. And then you can also make selections per region and per military list category. So here I should explain briefly that the common military list that is used in the European Union when issuing arms export licenses has 22 categories. So it is broader and comprises more than the subdivision in 7 categories that is used under the ATT and the UN ROCA. So this database obviously contains more information than you would find in national reports of the EU member states to the ATT. Here, a quick show of, for instance, licenses from Austria and Belgium, just selected randomly, no preferences here, where you can see the number of export licenses for 2020, 2019, 2018, a number of licenses, the value of those licenses, and the value of actual exports, if available. Then here we have a selection per region of destination. So here you can see all European export licenses, arms export licenses to Central America and the Caribbean, and to Central Asia, and you have all the data added up automatically. Here per destination country, here we see licenses for Afghanistan and what is it, Albania, hard to read on such a small screen. Also for these, randomly selected countries, the number of export licenses, the value, and the value of licenses, as well as the value of actual exports. And of course, this here, in this case, if you combines the export from all EU member states. But you could also search on, for instance, only the Austrian licenses to Afghanistan, and you will find exactly what that one EU member state has exported to Afghanistan. You can have select per military category, where also the military category or the military list category is explained. What it exactly contains, whether it's ammunition or aviation or armored vehicles or whatever, that is all explained in the database itself. Here, well, this is another way of presenting similar information. I'll just go quickly through it. Here you see the numbers in 2020 overall for all EU member states. 30,000 licenses have been issued last year for a total value of 166 billion, but the actual arms export value is much lower. This is because some member states inflate the value of their licenses quite a bit. So there's quite a discrepancy between those numbers. Then you have this beautiful feature where you have the whole the map of the world. This one, for some reason, it just selected Africa, just to show you an example, but you have on the website, you have the entire world, so you can select, even with your mouse, you can select one country and look at, or a region or a country, and look at what went there from which EU member states. We have charts showing number of export licenses issued and the value of export licenses. So you see, the first row is a number of licenses issued to destination. So you see that the US is the main, let's say, beneficiary of EU arms exports. And here you see a timeline over the years from 2013, which is the first year that we have the arms export data available online, till 2020. Denials, I mentioned them. a breakdown per number of denials and per criteria that has been used to deny a license. What you cannot search on is who issued the denial, because that is confidential information. So you will not find information on which EU member state issued a certain denial. Here you see the denial part of the database. And here per criteria. So this is, yeah, of course, the impossible link to this website, which I can understand you will not be able to copy paste easily or to remember even, but you can find the database by going to the EES website and then search on arms export control policy, and then you will come to this part of the website where you see the relevant EU information on arms export control, and there you will find this particular part of the website which includes a link to the searchable online database. We're obviously still working on making it slightly easier to access and to find the database. Before I close, just very briefly, one maybe explanation to add from my side, because I know that in the ATT context, you're obviously also looking at, at the costs of it and how much effort it takes to make it. So I can tell you that this took 5 months to build, and the costs were around, let's say, 60,000 euros. But I must add to that of course we already had the confidential part of the COARM online system, which is only accessible to member states, in place. And that means that member states already put a lot of the information that we now use in the public part of the database in there in the previous years. And that whole infrastructure of collecting member states' information from for the annual EU arms export reports was already there. So part of this database was, let's say, relatively easy to make based on the closed COARM online system that we already had in place. I'll stop here and leave you for further deliberation. And if there are any particular questions on the database itself, I'll be happy to answer them, of course.
Thank you, Aaron, for this very useful demonstration of a workable, searchable online database on arms exports. I hope you will stay with us for a little bit to answer any questions that might arise. I will also point out that the presentation of the EAS will be posted on the ATT website later. It is very good to see that the EU has made the transition from paper reports to a user-friendly online database. Our hope is that your presentation will help participants in their thinking of the scope and parameters for a possible database in the ATT context. We recognize that some delegations have already taken the floor on this subject, but would like to thank them for their input. We would now like to open the floor to any other participants for questions and comments. Maybe in the meantime, I can ask some technical questions and comments if you would like, if you would allow. Two questions that spring to mind in the ATT context is that there is a wide variety in reporting, with some countries reporting the quantity of goods and some the value of goods. Is that something that you're also facing in the EU? And the second question would be, do you also face a problem with non-public reporting or confidential reporting, and how do you deal with that?
Thanks, Madam Co-Chair, for those questions. So I think to be brief on both, the answer is actually no. I mean, we don't have a variety in reporting because the COARM online system that is being used by all member states is one singular system that all member states are used to, and that they that follow a certain template, and there is no way around that, basically. So that it makes indeed, obviously, combining the information from member states, from the EU member states, much easier. If you would go down a similar road in the ATT context, I think at the minimum you would need an agreement on what type of data you want from each and single state party, because otherwise, indeed, if the information that comes in is completely going in all kinds of directions, then it's difficult to combine it. So in a sense, that problem we don't have, although there are some member states that have maybe one or two categories of information that they do not report on, but in general we have a full picture from all the 27 member states. Regarding the confidentiality, so no, I mean, it's a legal obligation under the common position to have, for each member state to have a national arms export report, but also to provide input for the combined EU arms export report, and this report needs to be publicly available. That's the whole purpose of it. If it would be only for EU member states arms licensing officers, then you would not need such a system. Then you could just send each other, the 27 people involved, the relevant data. But the whole purpose, obviously, is for the general public, parliamentarians, NGOs, etc., to be able to access this information as well. Also, in order to ensure that there is some general support for the decisions, that sometimes difficult decisions on arms export that are being taken.
Thank you. I again look around whether there are any delegations wishing to take the floor. Also not online. That means that we can go to the, I see Belgium taking the floor. Belgium, you have the floor.
Hello. Thank you, Aaron, for your presentation. I obviously don't want to give the impression that only as other of the EU member states have questions, but I was wondering, basically, we have a de facto obligation then to use the database to input our numbers in. But has there been any member state at some point who has said, I don't want to use the database, I want to provide my data on my own template, an Excel sheet or whatever, and would that even work that way?
Thanks, Tom, for that question. No, I don't think that's has ever happened. I wouldn't expect it to happen either. I think the EU member states are the ones who, in the end, decide on their own legally binding common positions, also in the context of the common foreign and security policy of the EU, so that the member states themselves have agreed collectively to report on this matter, and we use the COARM online system to do that. Nobody's ever complained until now, but no. So to answer your question, no, that's I don't see that happening.
Thank you again. I give the floor to Poland.
Yeah, thank you very much. Unfortunately, I don't have a question regarding Mr. Naga, but to the website. I would like to draw your attention to a small technical problem faced by Poland and concerning access to the restrictive part of the website. Namely, they need to reset and change the password every year. And in our opinion, it's a bit tiresome and may cause a confusion. And we would be grateful if you could consider changing the login process to more user-friendly. Thank you.
Thank you for that very practical suggestions, which we will look at. Thank you very much. Any other delegation? No, I think that means that we can go to the conclusion of this meeting. Again, we would thank the European... Oh, I'm sorry. The Republic of Korea, you have the floor.
Thank you for giving me the floor. The Republic of Korea is deeply concerned about the dropping rate of annual report submission and would like to stress again that the fulfillment of state party reporting obligation is essential for transparency and the effective implementation of the treaty. We would like to express our gratitude to WILPF for the presentation. We believe that the presentation is helpful in leaving our measure to improve transparency related to gender and gender-based violence and facilitating the ATT discussions. The Republic of Korea assesses that the FAQ type guidance document on annual reporting obligation could contribute to improving the annual report submission rates and effectively implementing the treaty. Moreover, we appreciate the co-chair's tireless work in revising the FAQ type guidance document to incorporate the revised reporting template. The Republic of Korea believes that searchable online databases will enhance transparency and strengthen treaty implementation. However, we would like to point out that there should be sufficient discussion on the expected effects and the usefulness of the searchable online database. For example, by leaving the scope of data, accessibility, differentiation from the other database. It would be recommendable to refer to how the searchable online databases, such as the COAM online database, are operated. Thank you.
Thank you to the Republic of Korea for your intervention. I give the floor to Cameroon.
Merci de me passer la.
Thank you for giving me the floor. If I understood correctly the presentation, the COAM database is populated every 12 months. My question is how this database could be used by a transit country in identifying an export license from a European country, given the fact that the information is not populated in real time. The database is not populated in real time. And my second question is to know what support you can provide other states parties who are interested in this work at the national level. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. No, thanks to Cameroon for that question. Yes, no, it's true that for real-time information or information on transit licenses, you would have to directly contact an EU member state, because indeed the database is there mainly for accountability purposes. So you will have the information once a year uploaded around the summertime regarding the previous year. So I understand that if you're looking for information for operational reasons, then this database will not help you very much. You can look up data basically a year after the actual license was issued. So that's probably a bit too late. So the second question was? Yeah. So in terms of supporting third countries, the EU has several outreach projects, which includes the ATT outreach project implemented by the German Export Licensing Authority, BAFA, and the French organization Expertise France. With Expertise France, you could definitely be in touch. They have they are doing already a lot of work in several countries in Africa. And I'm sure if you want, I can put you in contact with the relevant people.
Thank you very much. Any other delegations wishing to take the floor? No, I think that really was the final delegation. We would like to extend our gratitude to the EEAS for sharing your experiences on this matter, and to all participants that took the floor during the exchange. Clearly, there are a lot of questions still to be considered in relation to this topic. The co-chairs will deliberate on how to take it further and will report back in due course. We encourage all stakeholders to reflect on the questions posed in the non-paper for the April meeting in 2021 and share their views in writing and through the online information exchange system. This concludes our final item on the agenda, and we can move to closing the meeting. The co-chairs would like to thank all the participants that have joined the meeting, and to say that we look forward to collaborating with all stakeholders to enhance the work on transparency and reporting in the ATT. And with that, I hand over to the head of the ATT Secretariat for final announcements.
I thank the co-chairs for giving me the opportunity to speak at this time. I would like to congratulate the new co-chairs of the working group for having successfully facilitated this session. I have two announcements to make before we close this session. It's about the side events that are taking place from 16:30 today. After this session, there are two side events that will be taking place. The first one is organized by Stimson Center as well as the ATT Monitor. It goes under the title Taking Stock of ATT Reporting. The second one is organized by MET for Peace, Development and Human Rights. It goes under the title Implementation of the Arms Trade Treaty. So these side events are virtual side events. The link to the side events is available on the ATT website under the tech side events. So if you go there, you'll be able to get the link and be able to participate in these side events. We encourage delegates to participate in these side events, but they start at 16:30, 4:30 p.m. up to 6 p.m. Well, the second announcement is just to reiterate what I said at the beginning of this session, that delegates who have taken the platform and delivered some statements or interventions, if those interventions are in writing and they want them to be posted on the ATT website, they can forward those to us via the info address of the ATT. And equally, I also remind the delegates that these sessions are recorded. So the recordings of these sessions, the first and the second day, I think they are already available on the ATT website. And of course, for today and tomorrow we'll do the same. But the recordings for today will be available tomorrow. It's not immediately available. So that gives you a chance to have to go through these sessions at your own spare time. I think those are all the comments and announcements that I wanted to make at this point. I hand over to the co-chairs to close the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So that was all for today. And with that, the session is closed.